Teamfighting is a complex and multifaceted skill in competitive PUBG. To break it down, I'll be using several theoretical examples as well as a couple real ones. My previous video about playing from the edge mentioned teamfighting advantages as one of the benefits, and I want to explain what I mean by that in this video, and in doing so, explain my theory behind teamfighting overall. So the first thing I want to discuss is a few terms. Advantage is when you're expected to win a fight, and losing a fight with the advantage means that you probably misplayed the fight. Disadvantage is when you are expected to lose a fight, and winning these situations is part of what it takes to be a top player, although it's expected less and less the higher level of competition you face. Outside means being closer to the edge of the circle relative to the opposing team, thus inside is the reverse of this. And hard cover is any building, but especially compounds, and soft cover is any terrain cover, so for example dips, trees, rocks, etc. So what exactly gives you the advantage in a team fight? And in a word, positioning. So then, what positions are the most advantageous for team fighting? That alone depends on many things, but there are three major rules that you'll want to keep in mind. So the first rule is cover. And generally, you should think about systems of advantage with cover as hard cover is better than soft cover is better than no cover. And the second rule of having an advantage in teamfight positioning is third-party potential. So does your position have a greater chance of getting third-partied in a team fight than your opponents? And if yes, you have a disadvantage in the fight. And this extends to long range as well. If you are in a position that's open to long range DMR fire, your success chance on both offense and defense will drop sharply. The third rule is about individual positioning or angles. And are you able to take wider flank angles than your opponents, and are you able to use these angles effectively? Let's look at an example from PGC. So G2 needs to push into the circle from outside, and in this situation, like I mentioned, we want to look at the advantage rules of cover priority, third-party potential, and flank potential to evaluate how good of a situation G2 is in. OGN inside of the house has cover priority, and they also have the ability to cover all the flanks around in combination with other teams such as Ghost who are in the distance. And you can see that as G2 starts to try to push up, they are unable to push straight into the compound because of the lack of cover priority. And not only that, but they're getting torn apart by another team on the side because they have too much risk of third-party potential in their position. And they have no ability to flank because of the lack of proper ridges or avenues into the circle. Because of this, trying to charge straight ahead into OGN without any sort of utility usage or any other type of plan is what caused them to die here. So in order to avoid this type of situation happening, you need to play it like chess, and you need to think ahead and say, where am I going to be able to move forward from in the next circle, and where will I not be able to move forward from in the next circle? And starting from circle 3 and beyond, you always want to be choosing places to play from that you're going to be able to move forward from or fight forward from in the successive circles. So from the same game, let's take a look at an example of a team who did just that. Coming out of the northwestern side of the circle, Vendetta played an overall slow game, working their way into the circle by looking behind them constantly and making sure they were clearing their backs and clearing out their sides. And what this allowed them to do is it allowed them to control a wide area, and this sort of area control is precisely what allows you to move forward into each successive circle and fight forward from your position. This control over their side of the circle allows them to take care of the second and third advantage rules of flank potential and third-party potential, where they are not in a position to get third-partied but have the ability to third-party others, and they have no potential to get flanked on but have the potential to flank others. With regards to cover priority, this is a little bit different. While in absolute terms Vendetta's position is not as strong from a cover standpoint as Armory Gaming's, it is in reality much more effective, and in fact this is a team fighting and positioning problem I see most in mid-level teams. When Vendetta and AG have to fight, Vendetta will be at a huge advantage here. Even though they started further from the center, they have the potential to flank AG's players without getting third-partied, while AG's players are forced to turtle into their dip in order to not get third-partied. This difference is what allows their Vendetta to easily win this team fight. In short, the worst mistake you can make when team fighting is to put yourself in a position like AG's where you're pinned down and unable to spread yourselves out. Additionally, putting yourself in a position like G2's, where it's impossible to move forward, is just as bad. In order to teamfight from the edge successfully, you must play a position that you can teamfight forward from, gradually taking control of more ground and executing flanks and fights to come out on top. When putting all these rules together, it is plain to see why skilled edge teams like to play this style. Being able to have an advantage in two of these three team fighting rules is a very useful tool. However, it's not as easy as I may have made it sound. The obvious weakness to edge play that I mentioned is the power disparity between you and any team with hard cover. If an edge team gets shifted away from in the mid game, or the circle is centered around a particularly flat area, it can be downright impossible to find any viable path to team fight into the circle. And in this case, teams may be forced to resort to crashing a compound or taking a team fight with a disadvantage, where they're either unable to get a flank advantage or unable to get third party advantage. And this usually spells death for the team, or at the very least will result in several dead teammates. Even discarding all that, playing the edge is a very technically demanding playstyle, and it will often tax an IGL's mental more than playing center. So always needing to think of not only rotation styles of enemy teams, but also terrain advantages around every part of the map can be extremely challenging. And additionally, everyone on the team needs to be able to win their trades and get opening knocks onto enemies in order to take consistent points in matches. A team with low fragging power is unlikely to succeed at playing from the edge, simply because they won't be able to win the fights necessary to consistently make up for the lack of central positioning. With all that out of the way, I'll discuss individual positional play. Although every member of the team should ideally be able to pull their weight in every role, people do fall into boxes with what they are best at. So I think the best way to illustrate this is I'll give some examples from the players on the NPL team I coached last year to explain a few of the many possible positions in the game. So try to extrapolate some of these to either the positions that you think you like to play or thinking about how you want your teammates to play. Dtreat's role changed a bit over the course of the year. In the first two phases, he played a long-range DMR support role, whose job was to call out positions of enemies for our flankers, and then he would also try to headshot and outtrade anyone who was peeking him down the middle. And then on top of that, suppress anyone trying to take different angles. So he was actually really effective at this, having the highest DMR damage of anyone in Phase 2, but after working on his close-range weapons over the break, he began to transition to playing this same role, but in more close range by the time Phase 3 rolled around, where he played the DMR support role, but farther forward in fights where he could still use his AR more effectively if he had to. David's role in fights was generally the anchor, where he would hold a central position closer to the front to support the flankers and the people holding secondary angles. And he excelled at raw aim and winning aim duels, so taking these types of positions let him do that the most without having to worry about his aggression or enemy's aggression. So my IGL was Lamplot, but in addition, he also played the role of primary flanker in team fights. So regardless of whether he would engage first on the flank or engage second on the flank, he was always taking the off angles, and his effectiveness at utilizing these off angles was critical in winning fights. And Agala played two roles on the team, which are almost sort of contradictory, where his non-team fighting role was to watch our back and our sides and make sure that they were clear, and his team fighting role was as a secondary flanker and close range player. So he would generally try to get as close as possible on flanks, either as a support to Lamp's flank or as a counter flank on the enemy. And as you can see with these examples, there are almost as many roles in PUBG as there are players, and oftentimes players won't fit into a box sort of like these guys did. Some players will do multiple roles, some players will do one role, and it really just depends. So to find the most effective way to team fight, do your best to try to create a system that allows players to work around each other effectively after figuring out and understanding what each other's roles are, and utilize the skills that everyone is best at. With communication, communication is so important in PUBG, and I really can't stress that enough, perhaps more so in teamfighting than anywhere. But communication is also too personal of an issue on each team to be able to effectively and concisely cover it in one video, and many teams hire coaches really just to deal with this one issue. But just to give a few pointers and try to make a little bit of sense, try to make comms as short and simple as possible. When giving instructions, give them directly to whoever should be doing it, and this goes doubly in team fights. So, for example, say, hey, name, come trade this guy with me, instead of saying, someone trade this guy with me, right? Directing that at people will make something happen a lot faster and be a lot more clear in terms of what you want to have happen on the team. Prepare people for what will be happening in the future instead of leaving it to the last moment. As in moments of downtime, try to talk ahead of what you want people to do and what's going to happen. And lastly, talking more is almost better all the time than talking less. So don't just assume that everyone knows what you know and has the same information that you have. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification on something if you're worried about looking stupid. It's better to make sure that everyone is on the same page and talking to each other. And that should do it for all the content in this video. I struggled making this as I kept trying to make more sections and kept reworking them, but they never seemed to become as cohesive as I was hoping them to be. So the video ended up shorter than I had originally intended, with some work going to waste after cutting it down, but hopefully everything that was presented made sense in the end. If anything didn't make sense, or you want to clarify something, or just want me to explain anything in the video, leave a comment and I'll be sure to reply. Thanks for watching.